G'day, Nick.
G'day, Bowie.
How you going?
Good.
You've been looking at the legal approach by Brendan Abbott's legal team on trying to get him out. So I think he escaped in. That's the issue, isn't it? He escaped in a certain year.
Yep, I believe 89.
Yep, but then these new laws came in about adding extra sentence to escapees. Came in after that time.
Yeah. So what happens was he escaped, but then he was serving a really long sentence in Queensland, and by the time he came back to WA, they tried to charge him with the escape. Back many years ago. So there is one of the main argument that the legal team, I believe, are running is to say that when a law is passed, it generally doesn't apply retrospectively, right? And there's a good reason for that, because if you do a crime and you don't know it's a crime at the time, and then later it becomes a crime, that creates unfair consequences. So the general approach by the courts is the courts will not apply a law retrospectively unless the legislation makes it in the most clearest language possible that it does apply retrospectively. So this is an interpretation issue when it comes to that escape charge and that additional time that was given to him. So that the courts have to make a decision whether the intention of Parliament was that it applies retrospectively. There's also another legal issue, a little technical one, about the Constitution, about the separation of power issue they're also arguing, which is, so they might win on that. But generally, when it comes to retrospective application of laws, there are some good reasons for it, and there are examples where it does apply. Like, for example, in tax, it often does apply. So on budget night, the government will announce their budget and their changes. And by the time that the tax laws come in, they usually actually retrospectively apply up until the announcement. They backdate it, because if they didn't, then people can change their tax affairs to avoid the
the consequences. Got it. All right.
And sometimes also in war crimes, we've seen that as well. Like there was a famous case which I actually learned about in the 90s where someone was charged for war crimes that occurred in the Second World War 45 years ago. So there are some times when Parliament does pass laws that apply retrospectively, but the vast majority of the time it doesn't, and it's rare.
Yeah, all right. Nick Maruchak's with us. If you want to ring in, you can. 133 882. It's 21 minutes to 11 o'clock. Hi, Tony.
Yeah, morning, gentlemen. So, Brendan Abbott today, arguing about length of sentencing. I want to know what formula or who sets the formula for sentencing for certain crimes. People seem to be saying that this guy shouldn't be released for the length of time that he's done for escaping and all the rest of the things, and yet most people are quite happy for a convicted pedophile to come out after 4 or 5 years and re-enter the community. So who's making the differentiation between the seriousness of a crime against a child that affects that child for the rest of their life and someone who's done something that may be a white-collar crime or a crime that, obviously 36 years imprisonment? Who's setting the rules? Who's putting the formula together to implement maximum minimum sentencing and sentencing laws in relation to the seriousness of the crimes and to who they affect?
Yep. So great question, Tony. So we have something called the Sentencing Act, which is legislation that deals with this, and every crime will have a maximum penalty. And sometimes some crimes do have a minimum penalty as well, but it's basically up to the judge. So the judge makes a decision on how much what the appropriate sentence will be. The way it works is once you plead guilty, your lawyer or you will have an opportunity to do something called a plea and mitigation, and that's where you ask for mercy, and you do different things. Like you might get character references, you might say that the person has been rehabilitated. Your lawyer will try and argue the best case they can to try and get you the lightest sentence. And the court, there's some things that are taken into account to lower sentences. They're usually developed through law. So if someone had a really traumatic childhood, that can sometimes be taken into account. It really comes down to what was their level of involvement. And so the court will balance all the submissions that the accused person makes versus the need to deter and punish. So it's basically, we have a history of different, judges make all these sentences, and if you think your sentences is manifestly unjust or too harsh, you can appeal it, and then it'll go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will make a decision if it's above the bounds of reasonableness.
And when does a victim impact statement come into that process?
Before the sentencing process, right? Okay. So that's where that's where the prosecutor and the victims have a chance to comment as well. That's taken into account as well. And sometimes they also get reports done. So if it's related to, say, drugs or alcohol or something like that, or traumatic childhood, there's a court officer that comes in and will write a report to the court as well. And if it's the drug or alcohol example is, generally they'll send you to counselling, have a chance to to fix yourself. And then if you've made some progress, that's also taken into account as well. So,
thanks, Tony. Thanks for your call. Nick, during a trial, I don't know whether this happens post-verdict when sentence is being considered, previous offences don't come into it, do they?
They do, yeah.
In sentencing?
In sentencing, they do.
But not pre.
Not pre, right?
Pre-verdict,
so the reason is because if you reveal someone's criminal record to the jury, that's going to have a very prejudicial effect, right? So if someone's being charged with a burglary crime and then the jury sees a criminal record that says they've been convicted of burglary in the past, normal people just go, well, that guy definitely did it.
Yep.
There are very limited circumstances where the prosecution can tender someone's criminal record. And usually the exception is, from my understanding when I was back in law school, is if the accused person goes on the stand and says, I'm a very good person, I'm an angel, right? They say they're of good character, then the prosecutor can tender a criminal record to rebut that allegation. So there are certain things you have to be, but if you're an accused person, you've got a criminal record, you do everything you can so it doesn't get released to the jury.
Additional question from our man Tony, who just phoned in. Who actually puts the sentence length in place? So that's part of the act, isn't it? That you were saying the sentence.
Yeah. So the sentence length is
range,
Parliament.
isn't it? Yeah.
Parliament will put it. They'll say this is the maximum. You can't go more than that. So usually the maximum, and then the judge has a discretion on how far they go. And judges will only go to the maximum in cases where this person has been committing many crimes. They've had many chances to do it, and then they'll give them the maximum or the most serious cases. If your first offence and if it's not a serious crime, you're not going to get the maximum.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for coming back to us. Hello, Sean.
Oh, hi there, guys. I don't know if this has cropped up lots, but I have recently I got a quote to have solar panels put on my house, and then I also a month ago I wanted to commit to the battery incentive. So I approached the company. They sent me a quotation back, and they were preempting, but they didn't say that. They just went on the figures they were told of the battery at the time. But they sent me a quote. I committed to it, so it says accept quote. They came, they installed all the solar, and now they're sort of treating it as two different transactions and saying, actually, the government changed the goalpost the other day. So instead of paying your, I think 3,000, I basically need to pay an additional 3,900. But they took a bit of a flyer, I think. I think they sent me the quote based on what the government had suggested, and when the goalpost changed, now they're saying I need to pay them, even though I've actually done a DocuSign and signed. So I don't really know where, and they're saying, look, if you don't agree with that, we won't apply for a battery for you.
Yeah, we spoke before we get Nick's response. We spoke to the minister the other day, Sean, and she said, don't apply. You have to apply through the government website for the rebate, and don't apply until July the 1st. So I don't know whether that comes into it, Nick, because she said you might have got a quote already. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a rebate.
Yeah, so this is, I'm sure, I can touch base with you after if you leave your details with the producer, but this is kind of the way I would approach it. First, have a look at the contract to see exactly how they structured the quote, right? And if there's any contractual term that allows them to charge you more. The next thing is if there's something called unfair contract terms legislation, which basically means you can't have a term in a contract that's grossly unfair, that's really unbalanced. So in this situation, what I think will be a fair approach is if you don't qualify for the rebate now, if there's nothing expressly in the contract, you should have the right to be able to terminate and reject the installation of the battery without being charged anything else. If there's a contract term that forces you to accept this higher price without having a chance to terminate, that's probably an unfair contract term, and you can get that removed. And this is the case where you want to start some negotiation. So the question is, how do you feel about cancelling the contract and not moving forward with the installation?
Yeah, I do want the battery. It's something so I do want it. I just don't know if I should. And they'd put it as a whole package. So yeah.
Yeah. So one interpretation is that the contract, and you have to read the contract. It might say that this quote is conditional on getting the approval from the rebate. That will be, that would be just a very sensible way for a business to structure this contract. So therefore, the rebate wasn't given. Therefore, they've given you the option to pay extra. If you don't want to pay extra, then you don't have to accept the battery, but they can't recover that from you. That's the way I will see that at a general level.
And as a citizen, Sean, I reckon maybe if you can cancel, do that, but also apply for the rebate, mate. See if you're going to get it.
And then go to another provider, but then if you can, but then it's like if you get someone else to do the job, they're probably
Sean, I'll pull you back to Holly and to Sean, and we'll get your details, and Nick can have a chat to you offline. We'll come back in just a moment. 133 882 is the phone number. It is 12 and a half minutes to 11. Thanks for listening. Yeah, thanks for listening in. I really appreciate your thoughts and your company. This one from Crystal, Nick, and this is on the issue of Brendan Abbott. I worked with a guy whose son had Brendan Abbott's gun stuck up his mouth during a bank robbery. The son was never the same afterwards and is seeing out his life with severe PTSD. He's been unemployable since. I, for one, am happy that Abbott remains behind bars while my friend's son suffers his own life sentence. So that is armed robbery. That's why armed robbery is treated incredibly seriously, because the stress and mental harm it causes people, and always has been, right?
Yep, it's aggravating circumstances. So, and also another aggravating circumstances is if you enter someone's home, right? That's their sanctuary. So this increases someone's psychological and negative effect. And that person, we have legislation. If you're a victim of crime, we have criminal injuries compensation scheme that it's supposed to pay you some money for medical expenses and for the damage you've suffered. So we do have a system in place. I don't know if that system was around back then. So this is probably something that came in the last kind of decade or two. But the system now is much better. It's not going to be perfect, but at least it's something that the government will look after you if you've been a victim of crime.
Thanks, Crystal. 133 882. Hello, Agnes.
Hey, guys. It occurred to me following the ambulance stories we did yesterday that what about the situation where you see someone who you think is in distress, as in needing medical help, and you ring, and then it turns out they weren't a total emergency, and then they don't want to pay the ambulance fee. Who's up for the ambulance fee in those circumstances?
Thanks, Angus, for the question. So we have a system in Western Australia called user pay. So whoever receives the treatment is responsible for the bill. It doesn't matter who called, right? So that's how it works. And I've looked up some of the cost. If it's an emergency, it will cost $1,200, and if it's not an emergency, it will cost you $670. If you are over 65 years of age and you have a valid pension concession card, you can receive it for free. If you have a valid concession card and you're under 65, you can get 50% off. And if you're experiencing financial difficulties and genuinely cannot pay the ambulance bill, St. John does have an ability to
waive the fee.
Yeah, or reduce it, something like that.
So, Agnes, I put it this way. We called an ambulance for a bloke in the foyer a couple of days ago who we didn't know whether he's conscious or unconscious or in fact deceased. Nick and Agnes, as it currently stands, I haven't received an invoice or a bill. So they attended. They didn't take him away because they woke him up and off he went. Thanks, Agnes. Thanks for your call. One of our avid listeners, says my lawyer will charge $355. Been with him for a while now. Then 5 months into our proceeding, tells me his fees and his level have changed, and now charges $455. Should I be charged at the new fee, or should he honour the fee that I initially signed on with him at? Oof.
Yeah, so it's quite an increase. Lawyers are very heavily regulated in all of Australia. So when a lawyer starts work for you, they have to give you disclosure. They have to be very clear about what the costs are going to be. They have to give you a written costs agreement. That costs agreement has to specify and outline all your legal rights, including the right to they have to give you an estimate of the total legal costs. They have to tell you how it's going to be calculated. So there's a bunch of stuff they have to do. So you have to kind of read through those documents. And if they do want to increase that hourly rate, they can. But they first generally need to either get you to sign a new agreement or obtain your consent for the new rate. So that normally works. They'll say, like, we're going to increase our rate, say, in a month or two, or in a certain period of time. If you continue instructing me after that time, then the new rate will apply. So if they're giving you that advance notice, and that's the proper way of doing it. If they suddenly just turn around and increase the rate without notice, then that probably is not allowed. And then you can call the Legal Practice Board.
Mm-hmm.
The Legal Practice Board is where is a place where you call and they regulate the legal profession. And if they find out the lawyer has done the wrong thing, then there are professional consequences for them. And and they have a shame register actually, where you can go on, then you can see all the lawyers that have been named and shamed, and all the different things that they've been.
So our listener also said, "Was just told this was the new fee. There's no agreement, or are you okay with this?" So you should have a schedule of fees from the first consult, shouldn't you?
Well, yeah, they have to give you upfront, and basically, you have the right to reject it, right? So if they're going to increase the fee, they can increase the fee, but then it's usually if lawyers charge an hourly rate, then you can just say, well, no, I'm not accepting the new rate. And what will normally happen is you just stop work. They stop work, and you find a new lawyer, and that's the normal process.
Yeah. All right. 133-882. Thanks for all your thoughts and your correspondence today. Where are you on this one, Nick Maruchak? Should the state government reinstate free entry for kids at the Royal Show? The yes are 30, the no's are 29. It's very, very close.
It's a close one. Yeah, I was thinking about this. I was thinking if it doesn't increase the price of tickets for everyone else dramatically, then I think yes.
Yeah.
But if it's going to increase it heaps, then
the model last year, so it's been in for 2 years. The model last year, an adult and 4 kids could go for $22.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it? That's half price for the adult. So, but it's now starting to look like an election sweetener, even though it was September last year. Nick, thank you for today.
Thank you, Bowie.
And thanks for having a chat to our listeners and taking a couple of issues offline. We really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Nick Maruchak from MKI Legal.